Welcome back to Squawk Box. So Harvard suing the Trump administration following the White House freezing billions of dollars in grants earmarked for the school. The lawsuit accuses the administration of flouting the First Amendment, and it asked a federal judge to declare President Trump's freeze order unconstitutional. Joining us right now is Education Secretary Linda McMahon. Secretary, we appreciate you joining us. I want to just understand from your perspective how much you think the decision around Harvard is directly around anti-Semitism versus what the president has said on Truth Social, which is about his concerns around ideology as it relates to politics.
Well, good morning, and thank you very much for having me this morning. And certainly the president made it incredibly clear when he was campaigning that he was not going to stand by and watch the attacks of anti-Semitism that were going on in some of the elite colleges around the country, especially Columbia and Harvard and others. And so when the Department of Education started looking into this and talked to presidents, I talked to the president of Columbia, I've also talked to the president of Harvard, and to how we could make sure that the universities were abiding by the law. And I made it very clear. I said, these are not First Amendment infractions. This is civil rights. This is making sure that students on all campuses can come and learn and be safe. And that is exactly what the president's direction to me is. And that is why we have had these funds either withheld or frozen during a period of time of negotiation. And we remain very open to continue talking to Harvard. But they have answered by filing a lawsuit on First Amendment rights. So I want to make it very clear, this is not a First Amendment lawsuit. This is about civil rights.
Ms. Secretary, let me read a portion of the letter written by the government to Harvard, because this portion, I think, has a lot more to do with free speech than civil rights. It says, every department or field found to lack viewpoint diversity, which, by the way, an audit is required that the government would have access to, must be reformed by hiring a critical mass of new faculty within that department or field who will provide viewpoint diversity. Every teaching unit found to lack viewpoint diversity must be reformed by admitting a critical mass of students who provide viewpoint diversity. If the review finds that the existing faculty in the relevant department or field is not capable of hiring for viewpoint diversity, or that relevant teaching unit is not capable of admitting a critical mass of students without viewpoint diversity, hiring or admissions within that field shall be transferred to the closest department, field, or teaching that is. There is an audit that would be performed. This would be required to the government. In addition to that, these numbers and statistics would be made public. I ask about this not because it's not a good goal. And by the way, it would be great if Harvard and every private university in the country had viewpoint diversity. The question is whether viewpoint diversity is really about free speech.
Well, let me just say that when we began our negotiations with Harvard, and this letter that was sent to Harvard was a point of negotiation. We were talking about several different points with them. Harvard released this letter to the media. This was a negotiation letter. It was really not a final offer of anything. We had hoped Harvard would come back to the table to discuss these. We would like to have viewpoint diversity. We would like to have all of the things that students that are going to universities have a right to expect. So this is a negotiation tool. We hope Harvard will come back to the table. We'd like to be able to move forward with them and with other universities.
By the way, this letter, as I'm reading it, says this document will constitute an agreement in principle which the parties will work in good faith to translate into a more thorough binding settlement agreement.
Exactly.
You'll see this letter incorporates and supersedes the terms of the federal government's prior letter of April 3rd, 2025, which suggests that this is the deal that the government is trying to put on the table.
Well, that is not the case. It was a letter that was intended to have both parties sit down again and continue their negotiations. That's what I sincerely hope will happen. But Harvard has now filed a lawsuit. The government will counter. I think we're on very solid grounds that the negotiations that we are having with Harvard, and the reason that these funds have been frozen is because of a civil rights issue and not a freedom of speech issue. So I feel very confident and solid in that approach by the government.
How concerned are you about the benefits that I imagine you must think, or maybe you don't, think that Harvard provides as it relates to the grants that have been given to the different scientific and medical units at Harvard to do the research that I like to think has benefited all Americans and taxpayers.
I think that the research that is done by many universities around the country has been incredibly beneficial, and most of the money that has been withheld actually has come from HHS, a lot of the scientific research. However, one of the things that the government is saying is that this is a very small part of the research funding if you consider the amount of money that these universities have in their endowments, and maybe we should look to those. But the government is just simply saying, we want to hold you accountable for the money that taxpayers are donating to universities and to make sure that civil rights of the students who are on campuses are protected.
How do you feel about removing their tax-exempt status and whether that should be done to Harvard specifically in a targeted fashion, the way at least some of the discussion that President Trump has had, versus doing that in the context of all private universities?
Well, I think the president has raised it relative to Harvard, and I think we have to look at each situation, one-on-one.
Don't you think that would be discriminatory?
I think we have to investigate and then come to the right conclusions. But let's do the investigation. I think we're putting the cart ahead of the horse a little bit here.
What would be the a settlement that you would be happy with? Are you happy with the settlement with Columbia?
Well, we're not quite finalized with Columbia. We are still in negotiation, but they have certainly showed a willingness to be at the table. I'm very pleased with where we are with Columbia, and I think even over the weekend, when we saw that there were some protests on campus, that Columbia did do exactly what they said they were going to do. The police were called in. They made arrests. They shut down this protest when encampments were threatened to be restarted, and that's exactly what we had hoped that they would be doing. So they've showed they're putting teeth behind making sure that students' rights are protected on campus, and I was very pleased to see that over the weekend.
I guess, Madam Secretary, when I talk to Andrew about this all the time, and when I do have some self-doubt about some of these policies, I guess it's when I think that one side is sort of the same criticism that it has levied at the other side, it seems to be engaged in itself. And now I'm talking about kind of, it almost seems like when you move past the anti-Semitic aspect of what you're asking Harvard to do, and no one would dispute that, but you move into the sort of the thought control or, the type of people you need to hire, that's no better than Harvard's legacy or the Ivy League legacy of hiring all progressives or all liberal academics. Is it okay to then turn around and say, okay, now we want you to hire a bunch of conservative people in order to get your grants? It's the other side of the same coin, isn't it?
Well, look, let's take a look at what we do believe, and what we have seen has been some of the cause of the anti-Semitism on campus, and it is from faculty who have come in who have clearly anti-Semitic views, and it has been from other students who have been admitted from the universities who maybe have not had their backgrounds properly checked, and a lot of this unrest is brought about by that. So I think it's really fair to say, let's take a look at some of those people who are coming in, and are you vetting them properly? And one of the other things, that we've asked to look at, and which I think is exactly proper, to make sure universities are abiding by the law that's already in place, and that is where do your foreign donations come in? Because that is a requirement that these universities already are required to do, and they're not doing it. Harvard hasn't done it. Other universities haven't done it. And this is absolutely part of the Higher Education Act. And we're just asking that universities abide by the law.
Secretary, if you remove the tax deduction status and you take away funding from a number of the universities and the like, where does that ultimately leave us? What fills that hole in your mind?
Well, I think, again, we've not said that the tax exemption should be taken away, but I think it's worth having a look at. I think the president has put all the tools on the table, and we should have the ability to utilize all of those particular tools.
Two final questions. One is, what role do you think the State Department should have in terms of vetting students who come into the country? Should that be something that the State Department is responsible for, or do you believe that ultimately should fall to the universities?
Well, I think that both the State Department and Homeland Security have both weighed in to say that they want to make sure that visas that have been granted, and taking a look at other students that are coming in, we want to make sure that we are protecting those students that are on campus. And so I think further information could be gotten from either of those departments relative to that, but we have seen that they are definitely looking into it.
And then finally, we've talked a lot about student loans with you over the years, and I'm so curious what you think is being done right now to lower the cost of higher education.
I do think that we should be looking at lowering the cost of higher education. I think Congress is looking at some measures to help with that. But in the meantime, we have almost $1.7 trillion in student debt. It's over $1.6 trillion, inching towards $1.7. And there have been no repayments since March of 2020. It is not fair that other people are having to assume this burden, that other taxpayers are paying for these loans. You don't really wipe away the loans, you just transfer that debt to someone else. And it's just, it's not fair. So we've announced that student loans will, the collection process will begin again on March 5th, giving some notice ahead of time. And if you go to, studentaid.gov, there are many programs that those borrowers can look to help them, tied to income, or if they're still having hardships. But we need to restart these programs to recover these loans that have been given in good faith. And if you take out a loan and you get a mortgage on a house and you don't pay your loan, your mortgage, your house is it can be reclaimed. If you take out money to buy a car and you default on those payments, your car can be reclaimed. But the student loan program doesn't have any collateral, and so what we have to do is to make sure we're putting things in place to help these payments get restarted and repaid for the federal government, but also to make sure we're doing things that we can to help bring down the cost of colleges.
It is a longer conversation. We hope we can continue it with you, Secretary McMahon. I want to thank you so very much for joining us. It's always a good conversation.
So much.
Thanks. You bet.
Okay.